Vampires in Iraq. All right. So, last hour, I've really taken a lot of liberties here. Stretch. Make sure. So, home stretch. The home stretch. So, we've got really good ideas out here, really good emotions. I'll be able to watch this later on and unpack all the stuff I was thinking and feeling. And then we have to contextualize all of these thoughts and all these feelings with the overall story of my life and who I am and who I'm trying to be and what art I'm trying to create, what type of man am I trying to be. Just a little task. This is just a little task. We're just trying to do little small things. Nothing too big. Just correct the largest injustice possibly in the history of my nation and figure out purpose in my life. Just a small little thing, not a big thing. Explain. So the Battle of Fallujah was not a defeat, but we cannot afford many victories like it. Explain how we let Saddam quell internal uprising. Have the logic of trying to fix other houses before your own house is in order. That's just like, spread democracy, bitch. We don't even have democracy here at home. American interest is euphemisms for American corporations. Change my opinion. It's a different debate whether we can win the war or not and whether we should even have been there. And that's something that I'm trying to differentiate between. I have very different opinions about how to fight a war like this than whether we should be in there. Because I like military history, and that's one of the reasons why I joined the Army and my grandfather was in the Marines, is that there's a way to fight and win wars like this, but then there's a separate question, should we have started this one? And those are completely separate. And that's how we can include other people who also like the military tradition and the art and science of warfare. We can include those people into our side. And even I feel like I'm a pacifist, and I feel like there's little, if any, justification for war in the modern age. But I love war games, and I love competition, and I love these types of things. But should they exist in the modern age? There's a huge, very, very high threshold for militarism. There should be, out of respect for your soldiers, if nothing else, and the dudes that you're blowing off 3 out of their 4 limbs, so fucking George Bush could scratch his ass and say that he started a war, go after the guy who tried to kill his dad. That's disrespectful to the soldiers who suffer the consequences of your actions. Dealing with winning in Iraq is treating the symptoms and not the problem. The systematic failure top down in the U.S. government that got us into Iraq might also be what is sabotaging our attempts. So there's systematic failure and lies and deceit that got us into Iraq. So that same people who bullshitted us into Iraq might be sabotaging our movements there. That's borne out by the historic record. The Iraqi army police are ready when they stop attacking us. The Iraqi army police are ready when they stop attacking us, i.e., they give up hopes of nationalism. So as long as they keep remaining or trying to remain independent is when we'll keep saying that they're not ready. We only allow the framework of their narrative if it's subordinate to U.S. interests. And what people who believe in self-determination and have pride and dignity are going to agree to that. It's like, we'll only allow them to be free once they're broken. So we don't want a free and prosperous and autonomous Iraq. We want a broken Iraq. Do you see how they're stuck between a rock and a hard place? To fight us is suicide. To agree with us, to fight us is literal suicide. To agree with us is psychological and identitarian suicide. So to agree with us is to put the U.S. above them and accept their role as a colonial tributary. But they can't fight us. This is a psychosis that we're forcing upon these people, and this is why I call it a genocide. This is the attack against their identity as free sovereign individuals that I feel we're sowing the seeds of our own destruction. Because when you take your humanity when you take the humanity away from other individuals like that, you take the humanity away from yourself. The oppressor dehumanizes himself the same that they dehumanize the oppressed. And that's just psychology. That's you get into Frantz Fanon and historical examples of, or art. Look into art and look into good art which has truly shown the dehumanizing effects of aggression on both sides. I'm sure there's plenty of examples out there. The whole military approach in Iraq is proof of my premise that lack of introspection or honesty with yourself leads to damage. So that's my premise, and I think that was going to be like the theme of the book. So now that we're nearing the end of these notes, I'm starting to wrap up my bigger ideas, or at least get some of my bigger ideas down. Once you read enough, then your mind is able to like make these bigger connections and these bigger pictures. You go in at first looking for all these connections, and then the more connections you get, the more you want to draw out and look at the bigger picture. So this is one of those ideas, that the whole military approach in Iraq is proof of my premise that the lack of introspection in your life, if you have lack of introspection and honesty, you're going to damage yourself. Another way I put it, after I do psychedelics and realize what they do to your brain in its establishment of truth, is a phrase I would use, is that you only shatter against yourself. Psychedelics will harmonize you, and you'll be like a guitar string or something. When it's plucked, the whole instrument harmonizes, it vibrates, and it makes a louder sound. But if you have any crack in yourself, any contradictions or things that you're hiding, as soon as you use that psychedelic and you turn off that default mode network in your brain, that nanny which keeps you within your blinders on so reality makes sense, because the way you're looking at reality right now is just a framework. It's an agreed framework that we all look at. It's what we call the rational world. It's an objective framework that most people are born biologically to perceive the world the same way. But psychedelics fucks with all that. And all of a sudden you're seeing the world in completely different ways. You're feeling all these different sensory inputs in different ways. Your sensories, you're getting synesthesia. So once your brain has less bounds, then any contradictions could float to the surface that you didn't know you have. So you only shatter against yourself is what I would say. Before people take psychedelics, I tell them, make sure you at least have an awareness of what could be in your head, because you're about to open up a lot of doors, and if you don't know what's behind those doors, or at least an idea. I've cried on psychedelics. Seems like every other time, every third time, there'll be ideas that I didn't even know I was suppressing until they come out. But that's why I do them. I do them to clear out the cobwebs and make sure that I'm a unified being, unity of thought, word, action, and that I'm not building up these little monsters that are dwelling in my head. So yeah, you only shatter against yourself. And even back then, I only started doing psychedelics heavily in my 30s because I would build that gingerbread house of success, and I was at a point in my life where I felt like if something bad happens to me, I could take that risk. The practice of psychedelics, you're always risking psychosis or death. That might sound a little harsh, but the reality is when you disengage from this reality and you're in that other reality, the truth of the matter is that you're in a very vulnerable, dangerous place. And when you're vulnerable around danger, you can cause harm to yourself. So you respect it. It's a practice that you have to respect. It's like going in the ocean. If you don't respect the ocean, you're going to cause danger to yourself. So you're the slowest, stupidest thing in there. I would tell people when I take them spearfishing, when I was a tour guide in the Caribbean, I would lead with that. No matter if the people were big and buff and cocky and this and that, or if they're soldiers or whatever their experience, I'd be like, no, we're going to approach it with humility. If you see a shark, if you see a big fish like that, you turn around, you swim away. You don't. The only person I know who got bit by a shark approached the shark. So you treat nature with the same respect. You treat psychedelics with the same respect. You treat your own mind. Because these things have more power than you do. The ocean has more power than you do. You're not going to stop that wave. That wave is going to smash you. All that water has a lot more energy and a lot more power than you. You have to work with it. This is a wisdom that you can get from Eastern philosophy. You could get it from surfers. You could get it from you could get it from programmers. Because data can quickly overpower your mind's ability to comprehend it. Data has the same, as a mailman, data has the same overwhelming feeling as the ocean's currents when you're programming or you're dealing with a technological problem. I've dealt with that before. where you just feel like you broke your brain, and you're like, fuck, this problem has quickly exponentially spiraled beyond my control. So there's ways to deal with that. But the way to keep yourself calm while you're problem solving within these frameworks with so much more energy than you have, I think, is with this practice of humility. Psychedelics, technology, natural systems, and self-honesty too. So, and then this is before I was building so many websites, before I was taking so many psychedelics, before I even went to Puerto Rico, and I was having so much interaction with nature, and that humility to give me peace and calm while I'm in dangerous scenarios. You know, if you're, I hate fucking barracudas. Some people like barracudas, some people think they're cool. I just don't like them. So if I turn around and there's like a 6-foot barracuda to my right, and their teeth look like that, they just look mean. And I never see a barracuda approaching me. I always turn, and there's a barracuda right fucking there, like within a couple feet. They're so, if you watch, Google a barracuda strike, and then you'll see there's some videos of barracuda strikes in slow motion. And all the fish are moving in slow motion. And then the barracuda will enter the frame looking like he's moving normally. He'll be moving normal speed at slow motion. So those dudes, there's just a little bit of advice. Barracudas, when they're about to strike, they turn themselves downwards at an angle. And I think their strike comes from bending their body, and then they shoot themselves forward. So definitely don't follow a barracuda if you see one in the wild. Let him do his own thing. He might be curious with you, and he might be checking you out. Whenever I saw a barracuda hanging around fish, I always get the feeling he's looking at me like, dude, don't blow my cover. This is my lunch. I'm just trying to like figure out who I want to eat. In the wild, you know, with lions too, when lions are well fed, they sit down next to the gazelles and shit. So like predators, when they're not hunting, are among what they hunt a lot of times. So you see the barracuda among all these fish that he would want to be eating any normal time, but I don't know, maybe he's just chilling. But being able to be calm around that type of shit is like knowing that, all right, I'm not triggering his feeding mechanism. He's I don't look like his food, and even if he was curious, I'm too big for him to pick a fight with. So as long as I don't antagonize him and make him feel threatened, there's no reason. So there's a mutual respect. The same thing with the ocean. It's like, what, you're gonna be scared of the wave just because it could kill you? Technically, you know, like a huge wave could drown you. But if you work within its rhythm, if you know how to, you know, duck dive under a wave, or deal with the ocean, or deal with a rip current and get out of it, but staying calm. And a lot of that calmness, a lot of that working within systems that can kill you, systems that can overpower you, has to do with honesty. And that wisdom, I feel, is related to psychedelics, related to all these different things, related to military wisdom. All of this is a part of the same pattern. Wisdom is wisdom. And you call it wisdom because it's supposed to be universal. Wisdom isn't just applicable to military science, or applicable to natural sciences, or applicable to like psychedelics, or like tripping, or psychonauts or something like that. This is all patterns of life that we can borrow from, and we can use metaphors or examples to like take one field and borrow from another, to love and personal relationships, energy flows. This is the cool thing about being human and exploring our human potential. And this is what lies and deceit rob from us, is that when the bullshitter comes into our society and comes into these dialogues and puts their own ego and their own self-interest at the forefront and tries to piss in the water, tries to taint the pool, and claim that no, life works this way, but it's really their self-interest. And so when that pattern doesn't work, and then they start blaming you, they start blaming me, they start saying, well, the Iraqis just don't know how to govern themselves, or our troops just failed us, or we failed our troops by not giving them enough firepower. It's like, maybe the framework from the beginning was wrong, because the framework was built upon lies and deception. That's where honesty comes into these patterns. You can't establish a tradition of wisdom without honest historic record and honesty. So when you take the historic record and you cloud up the mirror of us looking at ourselves, you're robbing so much more than the autonomy of the Iraqis. You're robbing our identity as Americans and human beings in order to get to know ourselves. And if the examined life is the only life worth living, then that deception and obfuscation, obscuring the ability to know yourself, obscures your potential to express your humanity. Obscuring your ability to know yourself, obscures your potential to best express what it means to be human. That's why this is a crime against humanity, not just because you're literally killing humans, but because you're obscuring the human story. We have individual identities, we have a country identity, and we have this world identity. And George Bush Jr. and the cabal and cronies who executed this war of aggression with so much lies and deception have gotten in the way of our human story, because that human story requires honesty. So if you believe in any human values, and if you care at all about human expression and the greater idea about what it means to be human, then you should care about correcting the historic record, because that's what's being endangered. And that's what the children understand. That's why they're vetoing society, I feel. That's this hypocrisy that goes at the highest levels of our society is what's threatening the very nature of our humanity and our social fabric. And that's what needs to be corrected. We can't make any progress unless we go through that door. That's the door we have to open up. That's the discussion we have to have before anything else. And that's why you have the things they carry. You have the what's his name, O'Brien, and these people who make these pieces of art, not to moralize, but to reclaim our humanity. Because if we don't do that, then we have nothing. That's what we've lost in Iraq. That's what we're losing in these wars of aggression, our humanity. Not just our humanity in the forms of us being violent and aggressive. Our humanity in our forms of us being able to be honest with ourselves. So that was about honesty. They have flowery rhetoric, but the truth is they are colonizers. Show this, the rhetoric that is all nice, but actions on the ground differ. Pops is also like this. His rhetoric is nice, but his actions are different. This is me using my dad as an example of someone who's not honest with himself. And since, like the military, he can't reconcile himself with his true intentions, in his mind he's so noble, he causes himself so much frustration. This is how I humanized him and understood that he was a victim of his own impulses. He, like U.S. corporate interests, is addicted, and he can't change, nor does he want to. But again, remember when I've talked to my family and we fleshed all this out, he takes a heavy barbiturate in order to control his epilepsy. We have 2 aortic veins. He only has 1. The other one doesn't work, hasn't worked since he was a kid. He was born that way. That's what causes the epilepsy in the back of his head, is it's a lack of blood flow which causes random firing in his brain, which without modern medication would have killed him when he was young. Despite that, he played sports in high school, and he's always been self-functioning and autonomous. He's never received any type of disability. He's always, he drove. We just talked about it this morning, about one of the accidents he had while we were all in the car with him. And he drove off the freeway, and we were 3 kids in the car and him, and that's one of the reasons he gave up his license. But he would drive even when we were growing up until he had a couple accidents that were pretty bad. This was one of them. We all walked away from them. None of them were really terrible. We literally drove off the freeway, drove down an embankment, over a ditch, and we ended up in a lot doing a circle until he came to. And me and we're kids, and we're in the car, and he's just like zoning out, just like, oh, and he wakes up, and then he drives out of the lot, drives to pick up my mom. She's freaked out. The car still drives. No damage to the car, no damage to us. That was a little miracle, but you know, that's no excuse. You almost killed your family. You shouldn't be driving. Common fucking sense. The same thing with like your, disrespecting your family with your little floozies. Like, it wasn't an actual cheating on your wife or your family. He didn't move to like Latin America to be with this fucking girl who was asking for money, but he gave her money. That was family money, and he disrespected my mom, so he had to account for that. And how are you going to do it in the future? It's like, he grew up Catholic, but that's not what we do with the whole like secrets and this and that. We have a certain way that we talk in our family. It's very open and honest. And so we talked about it. We did it. So all those emotions are coming up from the past. He would at least, but this is where I got this idea of radical transparency and honesty, probably, because I saw the effects of the opposite. I saw the effects of secrets, what happens when you let them fester and what happens when you don't open these wounds and let the sunlight and the air in to heal. But he would at least be better serve his addiction if he were honestly embrace what he wanted. Maybe he would even change because he would realize how empty satiation of addiction really can be. Because a lot of times, part of the addiction is the secrecy. You're addicted to your vice, but you're also addicted to, because I don't even really believe in vice. I believe in indulgence. I believe like shit, you want a lot of sugar, eat sugar until you're sick. Get over it, grow up. That's a way to learn. That's what I've done with girls in my own sexuality. It's like, well, you want an open relationship? Try it. It's a bit of a headache. Maybe there's a cool way to swing it. Maybe I didn't figure it out, but from other people I've met and other conversations I've had with other men, other women, that a lot of times what you think you want is not what you want, but you only really know that by trying it out, and then you realize, oh, that was just in my head. You know, it's easy. I think I was saying that in one other video. It's easy to respect monogamy if you never had a choice. But if you have the choice to swing a little bit or do other things, then maybe you can be more objective about it and realize that there's the value to like coupling up and partnering up and having a partner in life. Me and one of my female friends, we talk about it like a orchard. Like you could go after the young saplings and the young trees, but like those older trees give you shade. They give you like that old oak with like that big bushiness and everything like that. If you're with someone for 20, 30, 40 years the rest of your life, that's a relationship that, you know, old players can't have. So I know them on the island, 50, 60-year-olds still running after the tourists. They're still bragging about how they're fucking 20, 30-year-olds. That's cool and all, but then, I mean, you don't have that relationship you put 40, 50 years in. You don't have kids, grandkids. So everything's a trade-off. Everything's a benefit and a weakness. So whatever your path is in life, be honest with it. And some of these addictions, some of these so-called vices feed off of secrecy. You bring them to light, you bring a little bit of honest, transparent conversation to it, and they lose their power. CIA station in Baghdad, that's one of the reasons I did heroin with that one girl, to take it out of the dark. I trusted my mind. It was strong enough that I was like, you know, this isn't gonna, I think I'm good with it. So I did it with her. And then now, if we fall off, I haven't talked to her in a little bit, in a couple, like in a week maybe. We text usually, but if it's a year, if we fall off and she falls into a spiral, I could go check in on her and I can be like, you know, this isn't your secret. It was, I don't know. I think about it every now and then, but I've learned that I can't live other people's lives. Learned how to put my boundaries, how much I can do for other people, and how much I need to do for myself. All right. 40 minutes to finish this. 40 minutes, 10 pages, a page every 4 minutes. CIA station in Baghdad was the agency's largest, Ardwolf. So the largest, this is stuff that I care about. The largest embassy in the world was the Green Zone, big as Vatican City, and the largest CIA station in the world was in Baghdad, Ardwolf. So how important is Iraq to American empire? Well, the executor of our empire, the CIA, and also you can say the executor of our government. The last 24, 28 years of the presidency have been run through people with close ties to the CIA. Baghdad, Iraq, the CIA, the United States. What's going on? The assessment that cannot be edited by ambassador, they send out, so Ardwolf is the largest station, it's in Baghdad. They make an assessment which cannot be edited by the ambassador. It's delivered directly to the agency's director, the president, secretary of state, and defense. So think about this. The president has been getting both Bush Jr., Obama, and now Trump assessments that can't be edited by anyone else. They go straight to the agency's director, the president, and the secretary of state and defense. So they're getting the good info. They're getting the real shit. So I'm giving you the scraps and the other stuff. We're trying to piece this together. They know this and more. So what is their defense for their actions? Who is misleading who in the press in loop? Who is misleading who? Is the press in the loop? I'm wondering just how much is the information we're getting manufactured. And if not, does it matter? The best con men deceive themselves. At this point in my life, I feel like my dad's deceiving me with this little like floozy side. I'm like, all right, I'm thinking in my mind, has he had affairs? Has he been dishonest for like a while? And we've fleshed it out. We've had conversations about stuff like this. And then I'm thinking like this girl that remember, there's this girl I love, who who now is clean, but at the time she was on heroin. So I'm learning about love and deception from her, and how much can I love her. I know men who have loved her who started heroin because of her. I know people she introduced it to. So I didn't fall for that, but I could have. So I'm wondering, what type of man do I want to be with this role model like my dad doing stupid shit? What type of man do I want to be with this girl that I love who like is so artistic and creative and like no one else I've met, but she has these faults which are destroying her. And then I'm looking at the deception of my parents' business and this guy who's embezzling money, and my parents are giving him away to like, they're not gonna turn him in, but as long as he goes clean. But we find out that like now he's still acting dirty. So you see, I have deception and deceit all around me. So you wonder why I care so much about honesty and integrity and characters, because I have many examples by the time I'm 25, 26 in life of bullshit and what bullshit causes. And in my life now, my parents, my mom and my dad are still together, and they figured it out. And you know, it's a daily struggle like anyone with an addiction that they're getting out of. I'm not saying he's a sex addict, but I really think that the barbiturates cause one of the warning signs is depression. Barbiturates cause the depression, and he treats the depression through the sex. And so he has to watch out that the pornography and that the enticements that you get on the internet, that he doesn't treat his depression through sex. He's treating it in other ways. I'm noticing he's eating a lot. He's gained a lot of weight, but it stems from the depression, which I think is exacerbated by the barbiturates he takes to treat his epilepsy. If I wanted to be clinical about it, watching him all his life, so I contextualize his struggle he's going with, and I've acknowledged that he does the best he can, and I'm proud of him for the path that he's walking. And yeah, and he is a good man to the best of his ability. He's given me a great example. That doesn't mean that we don't fall, but we get back up. And that's the best example you can give to another man. It's not that you're perfect, but that you walk the line as best you can. And that's just an individual path we all walk. And then I have business, ways to do good business and bad business. Then I have this girl who now is clean, and I'm so proud of her. She's been almost a year clean now. She's just kicking ass. She's gonna be a fucking millionaire. She's got 3-4 jobs in New York. She's killing it. She's a superstar. And then I have some. I've always put my money on character, and it's never let me down. And the people in my life too, and they've come through. And so my tribe and my people and my examples and the people I love and care about, this is what we believe, and this is what's led me to success too. I think this is why I made money in real estate, because I really believe in character. But this is where I solidified those beliefs. CIA station in Baghdad. Who is misleading who? SIGINT, whatever. Signals Intercept Intelligence. Details for intelligence character. Colonel Derek Harvey. Military intel found 4 different tracks of financing from Damascus, Syria to Ramadi. 1.2 million a month. Core of insurgency is old Sunni oligarchy using religious nationalism as a motivating force. The CIA thought military was overemphasizing the role of Syria and foreign fighters in Iraq. Maybe because they were complicit? So, a colonel, who's not the CIA, says that the military intelligence, which is not the CIA, separate branch of intelligence, found 4 different tracks of financing from Damascus, Syria to Ramadi, 1.2 million a month. So we found out that Syria is giving them 1.2 million a month. And this is the old oligarchy. But remember, who is Saddam but the CIA guy? So this is where I would love investigative journalists or our own accounting of our own military to go in and say, is the CIA playing a game against our own military? They armed the Fallujah Brigade that turned on our own military. Our own military intelligence found out that money's coming from Syria when the CIA claimed that we were overemphasizing the role of Syria. Is the CIA just covering for the people? I mean, Saddam was our dictator put in place by the CIA. We supported Saddam's failed coup before he came to power, and we're the ones who saved his ass. He tried to do a coup, he failed, and CIA got him the fuck out of the country. What is the role of the CIA and the military? Is that, because that's a whole nother contract that we're breaking. If the CIA's actions put armed forces in danger, because then that's a whole nother level of crimes. If you're actually going against armed services, if you're actually endangering soldiers because of your machinations for global conquest and global empire, if you're actually doing things that are harming our soldiers. I mean, we have civilian oversight of the military. Do we have civilian oversight of the CIA? It's a very important question to ask in this day of age. Who do you work for? The U.S. government somewhat romantically feels that it's a constitution, an idealistic doc, while the CIA is U.S. interest. Head is from Wall Street. Corp charter has no idealism in it. Have an intel guy talk about this. The U.S. military intel is different from the CIA. No matter how sarcastic he is, he's somewhat romantic. General Mattis. It's fun to shoot people. This is General Mattis. It's fun to shoot some people. Actually, it's a lot of fun to fight. You know, it's a hell of... Hold on. General Mattis. This guy's in the Trump administration. It's fun to shoot some people. Actually, it's a lot of fun to fight. You know, it's a hell of a hoot. I like brawling. You go into Afghanistan, you got guys who slap women around for 5 years because they didn't wear a veil. You know, guys like that ain't got no manhood left anyways. So it's a hell of a lot of fun to shoot them. Yeah, Mattis, well, how much manhood do you have to lie to soldiers, get them into a war of aggression, put them in harm's way, you know, get 3 out of 4 limbs blown off, all for lies? How much manhood do you have to be a lying fucking con artist, sniveling piece of shit? You know, you're saying, oh, you want us to care about a clash of cultures, while these wars defund our treasury and put young men and women in harm's way. No, just answer me. I'm not in the military anymore, so I don't really respect rank. I'm just trying to audit the military, you know? If I was in the military, I might care about that general in front of your face or in front of your name. But like, if you give me bullshit, then you're just a bullshitter like anyone else. I don't really fucking care about the plastic on your chest or the ribbons or whatever it is. If you fucking lie to me, just like the next guy, I'm gonna fucking ask you a question just like the next guy. Explain your lies. And if you don't have an explanation, but you're making money off of endangering me or endangering people I care about, you're gonna have to answer to it. That's just how life works. You know how life works. You like to brawl, I like to brawl. So let's go. What are we talking about here? What are we really fucking talking about here? Are you gonna be accountable for your actions and your words? That's all you have to do in life. This is all I ever tell people. You just have to be responsible for your actions in life. Responsible for your words and actions, General Mattis. Just be responsible for your words and fucking actions. I'm not even mad. I'm not even upset. All I want you to do is be fucking responsible for your words and actions. That's all I want you to do. You talk about manhood. Teach me about manhood. You're a man. I'm a fucking man. You have a fucking dick and balls. I have a fucking dick and balls. Are you going to be responsible for your words and actions? Are you going to be a coward? Are you going to be silent? Are you going to speak? When you speak, what do you have to say? And then can you back up what you're going to say? Because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to speak and learn what I can back up and what I can't. So let's have a discussion. The will is not broken. They mean it. Have a lieutenant say, talking about swimming, desert heat, etc. I don't miss swimming as much as I miss jumping into a pool. Wait a minute, hear me out. You leave your feet and fly over the water. The water's going to feel like thick cream against the heels of my feet, but I miss the flying and the anticipation hovering above relief, knowing that you don't have anywhere to go but the cold. Bush awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Bremer, Franks, and Tenet. Specialist tells Rumsfeld, our tanks aren't armored. We're digging pieces of rusted scrap metal and compromised ballistic glass that's already been shot up, picking the best out of the scrap to put on our vehicles to take into combat. We don't have the proper vehicles to take us north. To which Rumsfeld replies, you go to war with the army you have this exchange with the evil colonel. Maybe have some politician relating Saddam security forces to Gestapo and SS of the Nazi regime. Parliamentary elections were held in January 2005, constitutional referendum in October, National Assembly in December. In 2005, bombers were attaching propane or jellied gasoline to IEDs and effectively creating napalm, burying them deeper and under concrete plates to avoid metal detectors. COIN, C-O-I-N, military term for counterinsurgency. Coin Academy, established 2005, just above Baghdad. Attending course is prerequisite for commanding unit in Iraq. Forward operating base Falcon is a rough area southwest of Baghdad called the Triangle of Death. Inside high blast walls, you have a cafe, mess hall, pseudo nightclub called the Velvet Camel that served alcohol-free beer. Fridays are hip-hop night with the Desert Pimps. 03 to 04, some troops ate MREs. Now all are full, so now we're just 03 to 04 is a different time period. Some troops ate MREs. Now all are fed mess halls. Smiling servers from Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, India, Nepal include one story about the third world worker. Also had Subway, Pizza Hut, Popeyes, Green Beans, Starbucks, 24-hour Burger King. In 2003, average soldier lost 10 pounds in Iraq. Now they gain as much. So now we got the junk food over there. OIF, Operation Iraqi Freedom. 15 soldiers a day buying TVs from the PX. School of Advanced Military Studies, where the Army is the planning specialist, colloquially known as Jedi Knights. So the School of Advanced Military Studies, this is an advanced school for the art and science of warfare. The planning specialists call them Jedi Knights. In that fable, in the Star Wars fable, are we the Empire? Do we have the Force? Are we the Force of good or evil? What does historic record play out? Have discussions about the difference between CIA and Army. Army is service of the American people, while the CIA is a service of American business. So they use the Army as the trained pit. And of course, every now and then, the Army has a trained pit, I think I meant pit bull. And of course, every now and then, the Army will have hiccups because it will always revert back to thinking it's a master, thinking that its master is little Timmy of America. Gotta protect America. While in fact, it's the banks that owns little Timmy's house. And surprise, surprise, this is me being sarcastic, I guess. So the Army thinks that its master is little Timmy of America. Gotta protect America. When in fact, it's the bank that owns little Timmy's house. And surprise, surprise, sometimes the bank and little Timmy's interests diverge. But don't fret, pit bulls. The happiest dogs are those that find pleasure in service and aren't nostalgic as to who feeds them. I guess that's like a little metaphor I was coming up with. This is how I get my emotions out when I'm like really upset and I'm reading this stuff and getting really pissed off. You write it out, you try to explain it, you try to translate the truth for people. Since Vietnam, and I'm the first person I'm translating the truth for. Since Vietnam, we abandoned colonialism and chose to install puppet regimes. Iraq is our first foray back into occupation colonialism. Tal Afar, a town of 250,000, dominated by old castle on a hill in its center. British colonial fort, known simply as the castle, houses Iraqi and coalition forces operating in Tal Afar, Iraq. Manning a portion of the compound are soldiers from the Florida Army National Guard, 07, would send suicide bombers 40 miles east to Mosul. I'm not sure what I meant by that. In Tal Afar, they placed 29 small bases to watch almost all intersections, able to watch all of city, but the city was only 3 by 3 miles. Mayor tells them when the tour is up, a surgeon does not leave in the middle of an operation. Yeah, but what is the purpose of operation? We started this discussion, one of the earliest notes was, what is strategy? And it's, what are we trying to do? Who are we? What are we trying to do? What means do we have to do it? And how are we going to incorporate those means? Maybe have an embedded journalist in the battle. The Fallujah battle, to open up the book, have the lieutenant go on a staff ride, military term for a formal professional examination of a historic battlefield. Spot near Mosul, where Alexander the Great had routed the army of the Persian Empire. So we're conducting our new colonial campaigns over historic colonial campaigns. Great. Haji, slang term for Arab, means person who has made the trip to Mecca. Major J. Bachar, Reserve Civilian Affairs Officer. Media are bald-faced liars. But isn't this an intel position? This is Reagan's position during World War II. He says the media are bald-faced liars. Media don't even get access to information. What do you mean bald-faced liars? Who isn't a bald-faced liar? You're telling me that George Bush told us the truth about Iraq? Flat agricultural plain south and southwest of capital is most, real quick, you're not doing America any favors by covering for the liars. Anyone in the military, anyone in intelligence, anyone, this is why Obama prosecuted leakers. This is why all these guys who have ties to the intel industry prosecute leakers so much, and this is why Julian Assange took the step of leaking so much, because we need an honest historic record. You're not doing our future, our progeny, any favors by covering up for lies. We need to get an honest historic record. That is priority number one. We need more information about what's going on in the world. Flat agricultural plain south and southwest of the capital is the most lethal area. The War of the Ayahs. Towns like Mahmudia, Yusufia, Latifia, Iskandiria, towns between Baghdad and Karbala. Fault line between Sunni Iraq and Shia Iraq. Some roadside bombs are 2,500 pounds under cement plates. Patrol base swamp. Half-ruined house in this area, bristling with machine guns and surrounded by sandbags. Shin-deep mud holes and shadowy palm trees. Important thing is to keep them fighting here. Shitty detail, have a scene in the medic station at patrol base swamp. Bear cots and hanging light bulbs like World War II. Window frame shielded by army blanket. Maybe have Nick go here, meet up the lieutenant here, or get transferred to his company later. Be stuck at this outside. This allows him to tell others about his story of the Battle of Fallujah. So I'm trying to figure out how to get the Lieutenant's Battle of Fallujah out. Former Iraq officers from Hussein flocked to army, became heavily Sunni, anti-Iranian. Police and the Interior Ministry, their boss, mostly Shiite, are pro-Iranian and pro-Iranian, armed almost as heavily as the army. Baghdad in 0506, so now we're walking forward in time. Turned over largely to police and army troops. Murder, kidnapping, rape, robbery, and bombing rampant. U.S. Mayor, it's a pure Hobbesian state. Total lack of security in the streets, partly because of insurgents, partly because of criminals, partly because of malicious security forces. But Hobbes state doesn't exist in nature. It has to be induced. We wouldn't have that unless we went in there with our strong armed forces destroying their civilian infrastructure. This isn't a state of nature because you're ignoring the shock and devastation we caused, and then the fact that we disbanded all those military-aged males and we cut the pensions to all those colonel and above leaders, tens of thousands of people with military training who are on pensions, and then we cut off their ability to collect any sort of money, and then we didn't secure the weapons caches. Bremer went step by step on the checklist of how to create an insurgency, and he got rewarded with it. Got rewarded for doing that with the medal of whatever that fucking medal is, the high civilian honor that Bush gave him. When people fail repeatedly at the ostensible mission, supposedly this is our mission, and they keep failing and failing and getting rewarded for it, we have to stop calling it failure. We have to start calling it what it is. These people executed on what they were hired to do. Or else why did they get rewarded for doing what they said? The only reason they use the term failure is when you bring in criminal accountability. Oh, that was just an accident. Because our system of justice in this society is based off of intent. So without intent, you don't have a crime. And so you want as much plausible deniability as possible. So the narrative is always plausible deniability. But look at the actions and look at the rewards and look at the incentive structures. The actions and the incentive structures all show us what their actual plan is. And the narrative is just a cover for plausible deniability to keep them from being prosecuted for what are really criminal actions and atrocities against humanity. Memorial service held in a hangar in Mahmudia Base, 101 Airborne. Chaplain captain closes service with Moses served God well, but wasn't allowed to enter the promised land. Wasn't allowed to enter the promised land. A soldier slowly sang Amazing Grace. Taps plays in the distance. Soldiers left crying and hugging. The CIA internal think tank, National Intelligence Council, January 2005. Iraq has replaced Afghanistan as training ground for a new generation of jihadist terrorists. So within 2 years of invasion of Iraq, Iraq has now replaced Afghanistan as a new training ground for a new generation of jihadi terrorists. They're responsible for creating the old ones, and now they have the new factory in place. We created a terrorist factory. Was it purposeful? Well, I don't know. The people who fucking made it were rewarded. So if it wasn't purposeful, why did we reward the architects of the new terrorist factory that we created in Iraq? If that wasn't the reason, then why did we reward the people who went in there and set it up? Country has become a magnet for international terrorist activity. Average counterinsurgency in the 20th century has lasted 9 years. Have a commander, well, Iraq war is long beyond that. To have a commander make the case that the best scenario would be U.S. and Philippines, 1899 to 1946. So he's thinking 47 years is how they want us in Iraq. They want us multiple generations. Poor planning and inattentive politicians. But then they changed. One officer states, Americans determined to preserve the Filipino by raising his standard and cultivating his friendship. This sounds very white man burdenish. And you know what? We also did waterboarding in the Philippines too. We didn't go into the Philippines. Back then, we spoke like the fucking colonial, imperial racist we were. Now we try to act like we're not that dude. And that's what's destroying us. If you're going to be a fucking empire, be an empire. Be a Roman empire and say you're an empire. And say that you're crushing and killing the barbaric hordes and state that you're dehumanizing them. And that's what I find, is that it's not the acts of war and empire itself that's destroying our social fabric. It's hypocrisy and cynicism. It's because our social sciences has taught us that no human being deserves to be oppressed within that imperial structure. No human being deserves to be dehumanized. We add racism and ethnocentricity to the point of thinking that a Roman was a better human being than another human being. That's how arrogant they were, that they actually thought these other human beings were deserved a lack of freedom for not being a Roman citizen, because a Roman citizen was the highest expression of being a human being. We don't have the type of ignorance to hide behind anymore. So we can't hide behind our racism or our blatant ethnocentrism because the world is too connected. And so all we can do is hide behind our hypocrisy and our cynicism. And that's what's destroying us, because the racism and that other stuff actually insulates you from the violence abroad. Ignorance, we all know this. Ignorance and ignorant excuses for objectifying, dehumanizing another insulates you from violence. How can they go out and lynch and hang black men in the South and go home and kiss their daughters goodnight and fuck their wives and still go to church and everything? Racism insulates you from the violence you perpetuate in the name of objectification. So we don't have those excuses anymore, because social sciences and social progress have advanced to the point that we know that other human beings are just the same as us. We know that genetically there's no real foundation for race, that it's all phenology or whatever. You look different, but those differences blend. There's so much areas of gray that race isn't a scientific category. That you can ask a scientist about that. So since we don't have those pseudoscience, eugenic explanations for objectifying the other person, they try to push them. They try to push the cultural narratives, East versus West, this and that. They don't hold water though. And so all we have are blatant lies and hypocrisy. And they're so easy to see through, and they so thinly veil our violence that our brains are breaking trying to keep up and trying to rationalize the shit that we all know inherently. That's why worldwide we try to stop these wars. We all know what's going on. It's fucking a really bad con game that we all feel really fucking guilty for. And it's just right below the surface of our consciousness. Just right below the consciousness, right at the bubbling up from your subconscious. And I feel like it's bubbling out into our popular culture in a lot of weird fucking ways. Every salute the troops thing that you see on an NFL game or an NBA, everyone knows it's a fucking sack of shit. Everyone knows that. Well, I put this into a poem. We'll talk about that poem, and then I'll get about these emotions. All of these emotions came out, and this is how I healed myself, and how I want to help heal other people. 6 pages, right? Why is or isn't Iraq colonization? It's not the old form, because nowadays the markets are global. So instead of having one master, you have to whore yourself out to global capital. But a whore is a whore regardless of where her John comes from. Have the 12-year-old say this, maybe not so eloquently. Have the little girl say that she's only 6 years of schooling, but she knows a thing or two. They assume she's undereducated, and not the obvious, that she's actually a little girl. Have a soldier spell out a doomsday prediction if we left Iraq. Al-Anbar falls even before the last American is out, fighting between the Sunnis and the Shiites. All shops and markets closed and looted. Kurds capture oil city of Kirkuk on the edge of their historical territory. Turkey invades from the north. Iran protects the Kurds as well as the Shiites. Arabs from Syria, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia pour into Iraq to support the Sunnis. All hell breaks loose. Oil Oil rockets past $100 a barrel. To avoid the above scenario, don't we just need a transparent withdrawal and international peacekeepers on the borders? Have strict punishments for anyone interfering with Iraqi politics and let them determine their destiny? You need a kind of faith in the decency of humanity to do this, while the interventionists are constantly trying to undermine this faith, because as soon as they get you to doubt the basic decency of man, the sooner you buy their protection. You don't get the crime report from the alarm salesman, just like the church is not going to tell you that salvation lies within, or the government won't limit its own growth. They acquire you through fear and keep you through hatred. You are set free by love. This is my foundational beliefs being formulated in the face of what I see around me as just fucking total chaos and confusion in my personal and public life, and in my identity in every sense of the word, my romantic identity, my family identity, my business identity, my country identity. That was the soldier's dying words, maybe put those words in the story. Worst case scenario is full-blown civil war. This was the goal of the CPA. Were Iraq to break up, Shiite South could harness oil money to build up the military, liberate the Shiite brethren living on Saudi Arabia's oil fields. Traditional power equation engulf rapidly shifting towards Shiites. South Iraq could turn into Shiistan. Kurds declare independence and Turkey invades. Sunnistan leads to the fall of the House of Saud. Arabia becomes the first step in the caliphate. Oil goes to $200. We have to invade Arabia. This ignores past progress in Iraq with democracy. So this is someone, probably I'm taking notes from someone else's dread of what can happen if we pull out. This ignores past progress in Iraq with democracy, assumes that successful, empowered Arabs are analogous to rabid Arabs. The same arguments used against emancipation during slavery. You can't free the slaves, they'll terrorize the U.S. This is a true burden of the master, of the aggressor, a constant self-imposed fear of retribution. So this is, I guess I actually worked out what the master suffers when he imposes his will and violence on the oppressed. He takes away his own humility and his own ability to see the world as a brotherhood, which is what I kind of realized when I was starting to make money. I was starting to fear poor people and then fear where I came from, which is this whole year I've pretty much given up. I've lived humbly. I lived decent, and then now recently I haven't had much money at all, but I've humbled myself in order to remember my roots, which was really important, and because of this. This is a true burden of the master of the aggressor, a constant self-imposed fear of retribution. For if he has turned a blind eye to the humanity of those he has imprisoned, he expects the same for himself. The original seed is that he does not feel deserving of love as a human, especially after he strips it from another, and so lives in a constant anxious state of anticipated retribution. Relate this to smoking crack. Have a black soldier talk about this with Nick, maybe when they're at the medic station that looks like WW2, and have a couple days to decompress. He relates how he was a crackhead for a little bit. Take that first hit, hold it until your head rings. Ring that bell. He closes his eyes remembering. He also has gang tattoos on his neck. And after that hit, you're just chasing the rock, looking to maintain. That's the nature of man, in aggression too. After you dehumanize your brothers, you're just chasing that rock. You have to. Live by the sword, die by the sword. You don't expect mercy because you're never getting any. And that's how they get you. By getting you to give up your faith in your brother, replacing him with a stick figure, a rice figure, a sand figure, but never a flesh and blood figure. Never a brother. This is the science and the art of dehumanization, which I was trying to probe. Also, this relates a lot to addiction. When I talk to addicts and you realize how much they blame themselves and how much of it is this low self-esteem, blame. Like, that's why you learn that you can't, judgment doesn't help these people because they're already judging themselves far more harsh and often than you can even judge them. Have Wall Girl call for a modern Saleh. And that's why all these emotions don't really have a place. When you get too emotional and you get mad and you start yelling, and I mean, it's good to get it out and you record it and you see how it can be, but when we actually get to the nitty gritty of trying to get people to wean them off their addiction and dependence on violence, just like any other drug, if we come in there shouting, get mad at them, we're just going to push them away. They're dehumanizing themselves by seeing them as a victim. Even the Doesn't mean they're not going to be responsible for their actions and the words, of course. Just like a drug addict, if you rob, if you cheat, you steal, you hurt people for your drugs, you're a victim of your addiction, but you're also supposed to be responsible for your actions. We can't let you off the hook when you're a criminal. But if we want you to actually change and reach you and reclaim your humanity, then we have to understand that you're victimizing yourself as well. George Bush Jr. is victimizing himself as well. Have Wall Girl call for a modern Salah and ed-Din Yusuf, Saladin in West. This was the 12th century Mideast figure, response to the Western Crusades, man of great ambition but modest, harsh but generous ruler. This figure can create a wave of a new pan-Arab feeling, an Arab leader combining popular support with huge oil revenue. This is the West's biggest fear, someone strong enough to nationalize resources for the Arabs and raise their people. Again, like the South and the slaves, the master fears beyond rationality the freedom and well-being of their former slaves, because in order for to become masters, they had to lose their humanity, and with it, their understanding of the decency of man. So to become a master, you have to become a certain type of person. I see a lot of people with money this way too. This is why when I get money, I want to do it a certain way, and I felt like real estate wasn't the right way. Because if you lose your humanity in the accumulation of your success, then you haven't earned anything. Money just gives you a little bit of comfort, and in reality, you don't need much comfort to be happy in this world. So all of this culture of just money and get it by any means necessary, well, if you lose your humanity again, your money, well, you've lost the one thing which has value above any dollar sign, which is your understanding of how human nature works. So if you lose that and your understanding of the decency, the inherent goodness in man, your money ain't going to save you. It's just going to entrap you. You just put yourself in a gilded cage. For with that inherent decency, how can you enslave your brother? And without it, how can you expect anything but righteous retribution from those you have trespassed against? Thus it will always be that the aggressor's true enemy is within, from whom he will find no solace unless he undertakes the long, arduous journey to reclaim the humanity he has forsaken. Have the preceding speech happen within the first 30 pages to set the tone. So now, at the end of my notes, I'm starting to realize what my tone of the book will be, because this is in a military leadership book. Don't raise a problem without raising a solution. I would never create art that was purely cynical, just leaving you with a, oh fuck, the world sucks moment. So within the 30 pages, within the beginning of the story, I was going to lay the stage of the moral discussion we were going to have, and about how no matter how evil man can be, the greatest victim of that evil is the person who perpetrates it himself. If you look at the moral fables in the Bible with heaven and hell, it is the devil is cast out of heaven. So as proud as he is for being the devil, he lost heaven for being the devil. We all know this in life. The greatest punishment to the asshole is having to live the life of an asshole, and everything that comes with it. The constantly looking over your shoulder, the inability to love, inability to have close friends. This guy told me this when I was in real estate. He said, do right and fear no man. Do right, fear no man. And to live a fearless life is a life of peace and joy. Because when you know you're on the right path, and you know, no weapon can be forged against you. These are all the Christian. I'm really familiar with the Christian ethos, because that's what I grew up with. I've expanded my vocabulary and my belief systems beyond words and beyond systems. And I believe if you're going to have a system, Zen is the least formulaic of all the systems. But even then, the Tao which can be spoken is not the true Tao. So real spirituality and real faith doesn't have words, doesn't have names, doesn't have leaders, but it has this wisdom. This wisdom is at the core of real spirituality. This wisdom about humanity, how we can be decent to each other, how we can bring out that is most decent within us. And when we do have these bad parts of our nature that come out, how we can then turn the water into wine, how we can transform the worst of our nature into the best. We need that wisdom right now when we have these discussions, how to transform the worst of our history. This could become the best of our history if we do it the right way. You can take more eloquent word speeches by Wall Girl, put them in the mouth of the crackhead, give her other simpler material. So this is just ways I was going to put those words into the narrative. But yeah, this is how I ended positively. We have 6 more pages. It's not so bad. We can do this. 1 more hour. Patience and forgiveness as we embark upon a journey which is of an indeterminate length.